Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, I'm going to be doing a little bit more basic commentary and be sharing some of my K-pop hot takes, which is basically just a type of commentary that will spark more attention than usual. So that does kind of mean that the point of views that I'm going to be sharing today will be a little bit more harsh than what I usually do on my channel, but none of these sections are going to get hateful, so it's not that big of a deal. If you have any thoughts about what I say that you want to share, feel free to do that in the comment section below. And without further ado, let's start this video by getting into my first hot take. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is my opinion that if you don't write your own lyrics, you can't really be considered a good rapper as a K-pop idol. And I know this is a topic that's been covered like a million times on K-pop YouTube, but I had a few things that I wanted to talk about that I don't think many people have done before. Now, I know the first thing that a lot of people want to do when they call K-pop idols not real rappers is compare them to Western rappers who aren't in the K-pop scene. And for the most part, I totally agree with people doing this. You know, people can praise K-pop idols for their rap flow, but the fact is that writing your own lyrics and coming up with your own punchlines is just as important as having a good flow. And because a lot of K-pop idols don't write their own lyrics, a lot of people say that you can't call those kind of K-pop idols good rappers. For the most part, yes, I completely agree with this. And if you do a little bit of research into Western rappers, you'll see that a huge amount of them write literally every single thing that they ever put out. And those who don't get a lot of flack for it. So this puts this kind of expectation onto K-pop rappers where they need to write every single verse that they ever do. And that's where I kind of give a little bit of leeway to idol rappers who write most of their own verses but might not have a credit on every single song that they've ever appeared on. Maybe this opinion is just a me thing, and if you disagree with me, that's totally fine. I just think that, you know, it's an absolute fact that K-pop idols are so much more busy than Western rappers, and since K-pop idols are constantly rushed to put out new music, I don't necessarily blame them, and I don't really think it takes away from their integrity as a good rapper if they have a couple raps every now and again that they didn't write themselves. Just because I think it's kind of likely that they literally did not have enough time to go through the entire creative process in order to write their own verse. For some people, it might take a long time for them to come up with a verse that they're completely satisfied with. And Western artists are allowed to take the time to perfect everything, while K-pop idols aren't. And for example, when Soyeon from I-dle has written 99% of all of the verses she's ever put out, I don't think it's that big of a deal when she didn't write her own verse when she collaborated with KDA for Pop Stars. And I don't blame Castle J from MCND for not writing the lyrics to Not Over when they got the song 3 weeks before their comeback, and they also had to learn the choreography and record all of their other songs and film the music video and just everything else that took up the time in their schedule where they just couldn't write their own verse. So to summarize, I agree with the idea that you have to write your own lyrics if you want to be considered a good rapper, but for K-pop idol rappers, I give them a little bit of slack here because they just are a lot more busy than most other musicians. Sorry, that point took a lot longer to explain than I thought it was going to. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. So my second, somebody who can hit really high notes. And that's it. I know this doesn't apply to every single K-pop stan, and you might be sitting there and be thinking, no, I know you need to have good technique to be a good vocalist too. But one of the biggest examples that I can use as to why I think this is important to still talk about is the fact that so many people still do not think that Jaehyun from NCT deserves his main vocal position. I still see so many people say that, like, even today, and whenever I do, I'm just like, are you dumb? Because yes, Jaehyun cannot hit the highest notes, and no, he doesn't get the most lines in the group, but his technique and tone are kind of unmatched within NCT, and if you see any of his solo covers, where he gets to sing an entire song in a register that he's comfortable with, at that point, if somebody does that, I don't understand how they can think that Jaehyun isn't main vocal material. To me personally, I'd much rather have a well-versed and stable baritone as a main vocal than an unexperienced tenor who can hit high notes but does it unhealthily. Note that I'm not saying that any of the other NCT members are like that. I'm just trying to say that K-pop stans constantly undermine and undervalue baritone singers, and just because K-pop is a genre that overvalues high notes and doesn't let baritone singers get the most lines, does not mean that these main vocal baritones do not deserve their main vocal positions. And I think that K-pop stans should think just a little bit harder before discrediting baritone main vocals the way they do. So now we're gonna move on to our third point, but our third point is kind of just a continuation of the second point, and that is my opinion that K-pop groups do not need a great vocalist in order to be successful. They just need an acceptable one. Like I said before, K-pop stans don't really know what a good vocalist is, so as long as you have someone in the group that can hit high notes, then you're basically good to go. And it doesn't matter if your technique kind of sucks, as long as you can deliver a high note that sounds powerful to the point where it's going to impress the people listening. I'm not going to name names, but there are two very, very successful girl groups that have debuted in the last year, and even though I don't think that either of them really have an amazing vocalist, they're both wildly successful still. And that's because their vocalists are acceptable and their voices don't make the songs that they put out sound bad. But I'll leave it up to you to decide who I'm talking about. Moving on, we have my fourth hot take for this video, which is that recently, out of all of the SM entertainment groups, NCT is the only one that I can really get into. First of all, Red Velvet was one of the first groups that I ever got into, and I love the members, so they are still on my stan list. But I guess for me, their newer music doesn't have as much longevity as their older stuff. Like, I still listen to songs such as Bad Boy and Russian Roulette all the time. I know Bad Boy isn't that old, but it's still not like their newer stuff. And even though at one point I literally posted on my community tab that Feel My Rhythm was my song of the year, to be honest, I don't even listen to it anymore. And it's not even that I overplayed it, I just don't really care for the song anymore. Sadly, that's also how I feel about a majority of their newer B-sides, and I kind of just feel myself drifting away from Red Velvet as a group recently. As for Aespa and Shinee, I feel like their more recent releases are kind of like objectively good pieces of music, but they also really aren't for me at all. I'm just not a huge fan of the genres that they do, and while I respect their identities as groups, they also just aren't really for me. And as for EXO, I actually love their music, but I don't really feel inclined to get into them as a group when half of the members are inactive right now, and there wouldn't really be anything for me to look forward to in the near future that would make me want to stan them. Meanwhile, even though NCT do miss on occasion when it comes to their title tracks and a few of their B-sides, I still do find myself enjoying a majority of the music that they do put out, and a lot of the tracks that I don't enjoy at first end up growing on me a lot more than I'd expect. I love that there are so many different subunits to explore, and I love how they have so many members that it's quite literally impossible for you to not like one of them, and because there are so many of them, there's always so much new content to choose from. Overall, out of every SM entertainment group, I think NCT is the most interesting to me personally, and they're the only one that I find myself getting more interested in as time goes on. My fifth hot take is that Mnet is never gonna produce a Road to Queendom show. Mnet has put out 2 seasons of Queendom, a season of Kingdom, and a Road to Kingdom season, so a lot of people are kind of convinced that they're also gonna do a Road to Queendom at some point. But thinking about it logistically, I don't see this ever becoming a reality, because I think Mnet invested in a Road to Kingdom season because at the time there were so many boy groups who were never able to get their first win on a music show, but those boy groups were still popular because they were able to get huge fan bases despite not charting that well within South Korean music charts. And when Mnet made Road to Kingdom, they were relying on these fan bases in order to boost their viewership, which is something that they wouldn't really be able to do the same thing for if they made a Road to Queendom season. Because underrated girl groups, they might have a lot of casual listeners who are general K-pop fans who listen to their music, but these casual listeners aren't really dedicated enough to these girl groups to the point where they'd tune in if they showed up on a Road to Queendom. Because generally, boy group fans are a lot more dedicated to their favorite groups than girl group fans. See, Queendom 1 and Queendom 2 were able to be successful because they had big names in their cast, to the point where even the general public would want to tune in, and K-pop fans and the general public were the target audience for these shows. And if they did a Road to Queendom with a lot of underrated groups, they would lose all of the interest from the general public because they don't know who these groups are. And I feel like overall, Mnet views the idea of Road to Queendom as a huge opportunity to lose money, and I don't think that's a kind of risk that they'd be willing to take, which is why I'm pretty confident in the idea that Road to Queendom is never gonna happen. On to my next hot take, which is also Queendom related, is that WJSN's win on Queendom 2 was not rigged. Another one that I view as pretty logical if you think about it. So the main thing that I wanted to talk about here is Mnet's rule that they only counted 1 stream per day per user on Spotify. I know a lot of people were upset and they called the results rigged because VIVIZ and Loona had the highest streams, even though WJSN had 2nd place in the digital score. But I wanted to ask everybody who's still confused by those results, out of VIVIZ, WJSN, and Loona, which 2 groups out of those 3 have the most dedicated fan bases? Fan bases that are so dedicated to the point where they would stream their favorite group's Queendom song, increasing the amount of overall streams that their song got, but not representing the true results if the rule was that only 1 stream counted per account. If you think about it, it kind of makes sense that WJSN had more points. VIVIZ and Loona fans are so much more dedicated, so it's a lot more likely that people who listen to their songs once would listen to them multiple times. But WJSN's fanbase isn't as big as either of those two groups, so even if they had less streams, it's more likely that a majority of those streams were by people who didn't care enough to listen to the song more than once per day. And even though they didn't have as many streams, they would still have a really good amount of unique listeners, because even though WJSN's fanbase isn't the largest, people still know who they are to the point where they would care enough to listen to their song. Obviously it's Mnet and we can never trust them 100%, but I wouldn't really be shocked if it turned out that these results were 100% accurate, and I think the huge amount of upset that VIVIZ and Loona stans created was pretty largely just because they didn't understand the rules of the game. And now we move on to my final hot take for this video, which is probably my most interesting one, and it's that the K-pop industry thrives over scandals. Now, you might be scratching your head at this because this is a pretty confusing concept, so I wanted to explain this as simply as I could by sharing my main point, which is that K-pop fans love having a villain to root against. If you think about it, the K-pop industry gets so much money by making fans more invested and dedicated to the groups that they like. And what better way to make people like the groups that they do more than make their favorite groups look better than others in comparison when an idol or a group gets exposed for being quote-unquote problematic. I feel like when the newest, biggest K-pop scandal comes out, people begin to view whoever gets branded as controversial or problematic through this scandal as a villain. And when K-pop fans watch these people be cancelled in real time, since they don't take scandals or controversies that seriously really, while I don't agree with this kind of mindset, one of the first things that so many K-pop fans will think is, wow, I'm glad it wasn't insert their favorite group here. I'm not here to share my own opinion on the Garam situation because that's not what this video is for, but I did want to share my own personal experiences as to what I saw people say about the situation, because since one of the primary factors involved in Garam's controversy is that she was bad-mouthing the group I.V and its members, specifically ONEUS, since it was speculated that Garam was a Starship trainee and at one point was supposed to be in I.V.'s lineup. When Garam's controversy truly blew up following their debut, one of the main things that I saw I.V.'s fans saying is, wow, I'm so glad that she didn't debut in I.V. And this mutual hatred that this fandom had for this girl made their love for their own favorite group become so much stronger in a weird way. And I feel like it's a very strange and almost unhealthy behavior that so many K-pop fans exhibit, where the bonds within a fandom grows and their support for their favorite group increases because of the mutual hatred of a specific group or idol. And I don't really like how it seems as if K-pop fans will support their favorite groups more because of the mutual hatred of someone outside of the group. But I do think that this is kind of the case, and because of this, with each new controversy, K-pop fans put so much more money into the industry. I might make an entirely separate video going really deep into this idea, but just for now, I wanted to put that idea into people's heads and get people to start to think about it. But right now, I just had enough ideas in my head to really articulate that one main point, and if I do come back to it in the future, it's gonna be in a separate video, in a video essay format. But for now, that concludes this video. Once again, if you had any thoughts about what I said in this video, especially on my last point, I would love if you left a comment in the comment section down below. And if you enjoyed what I had to say, consider leaving a thumbs up, and if you want to see more of my ideas, consider subscribing. Thank you all so much for watching this video. I think I might do a community tab in the future asking if people really want me to do a video essay on my last point, but for now, I'm gonna see what people's responses are to what I said in the last point on this video. Thank you all again so much for watching, and without further ado, I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.